Joining us, MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delaney and New York Times reporter who covers the Justice Department, Glenn Thrush. Also, MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin. Glenn, do you have any idea what the president is talking about, the day of reckoning and retribution?
I have to consult with my Bible to figure that out. This is just tracks with the same language that he throws around all the time. I mean, it sounds exactly like the speech he gave at the Great Hall last March, in which he promised retribution against his enemies. And really what it just does is we have a real investigation that needs to take place here. We have a woman who died under tragic and very questionable circumstances. Normally, we would have a straight line investigation into the behavior of all parties involved. And when you've got the guy at the top of the organization, a man who himself has said, using terms like retribution and referring to people as domestic terrorists without any evidence prior to the conduct of an investigation, that creates an enormous number of questions about what proceeds from here on in.
Yeah, it forces people to question whether they can trust any investigation that might be happening. And on that subject, Ken, you've got reporting on what actually is happening in the Justice Department, or better yet, what is not happening in the Justice Department. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that's right, Katie. My colleague Carol Leonnig and I reported last night that as many as 4, and now we believe it's up to 6 of the top officials in the criminal division of the criminal section of the Justice Department Civil Rights Division have resigned, in part because of concerns that the Civil Rights Division and that criminal section is being prohibited from investigating this matter. And these are the people that investigate police uses of force. They investigated the Tyree Nichols situation, the George Floyd situation, the Breonna Taylor case. This is what they do for a living. They don't investigate every police shooting, but the national high-profile ones, generally one of these prosecutors from Washington will fly out to the scene and start gathering evidence. Well, they were told 3 days ago, we are not going to be involved in this. And some of them had already contemplated resigning, and some had put in their papers to try to retire, but we're told that this really put them over the edge. And we're talking about the entire leadership of the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division, which has already been decimated because it's being run in a way diametrically opposed to the way it's ever been run before. And the New York Times first reported, and I've now confirmed today, that in addition to that, 6 federal prosecutors in Minnesota have now resigned in protest because the FBI is investigating the victim in this case as a potential domestic terrorist. And they are very troubled by that. This is not how these things normally go. This is just not the kind of thing we've ever seen before. Look, no one is, these federal prosecutors and FBI agents are not saying that this officer is guilty. What they're saying is there needs to be a credible investigation, and they're being prohibited from really doing that, Kate.
The resignations really make you wonder about who's left and what might happen at the Justice Department going forward. If there are people who don't believe in what is happening at the DOJ, believe that it violates fundamental principles of fairness, and they're resigning, who's left?
That's a very good question. And I also want to draw some attention to who these people were who did resign, Katie, because they're not radical leftists or liberals. Joseph Thompson, who was the number 2 at the District of Minnesota, is one of the 6 Minnesota prosecutors who has resigned because, according to the New York Times, he was being pressured to investigate Becca Good, who is Renee Good's widow, as well as he was bothered by the decision not to conduct a fulsome investigation into Renee Good's death. Joseph Thompson worked on Special Counsel Robert Hur's investigation into Joe Biden's possession of classified documents. He was the acting U.S. attorney in the District of Minnesota, appointed by President Trump. He is a person who oversaw the ongoing fraud investigation into the expenditure of child care money in Minnesota. He is nobody's idea of a crazy liberal, and yet this was too much for Joseph Thompson, apparently, and 5 of his colleagues in Minnesota to bear, according to the New York Times and others.
So, Glenn, help me understand a little bit more about the who's left question and the accountability and also the trustworthiness of those remaining in DOJ.
Well, I want to add something to our previous reporting and also what Lisa just said. It's my understanding from talking to a couple of people in the department that Thompson may not necessarily have been inclined to prosecute the officer. This is not a guy, again, we're not talking about people who are out there in the streets protesting ICE. We're talking about career law enforcement officials who tend to be, law and order type prosecutor. So when you take these individuals who are sort of reared in a tradition of the department, both in Washington and out in U.S. Attorney's Office, that's about collecting evidence and drawing conclusions next, and place them in an environment where it seems from the president on down, a predetermination about the course of this investigation has been made. These people are going to leave the department. And to your point, let's just look at the Civil Rights Division under Harmeet Dillon, who is probably, next to the president himself, the most prolific tweeter currently on the government payroll. This is somebody who has said that she plans to weigh in very heavily in the midterm elections and look at instances of voter fraud, even though most of the allegations that she has made in the past as an attorney working for Donald Trump have been proven to be spurious. This is an individual who has essentially busted up all of the consent decrees and agreements the Biden administration made with local law enforcement over previous incidents of police violence. So you are talking about a department in the name of anti-politicization and anti-weaponization that appears to be determining investigative or attempting to determine investigative outcomes prior to the actual gathering of fact.
Yeah, and Ken, when Glenn brings up the 2026 elections, are you hearing any growing concern about what might happen if Republicans lose?
Growing concern about Republicans. Oh, in terms of what the Justice Department might do?
Yeah,
of course, yes, because this Justice Department has thrown away all the norms. And so, look, remember that famous incident before when Donald Trump was trying to get the Justice Department to write a letter to states saying that there was fraud, and they refused to do it to a person. These were Donald Trump's people, and they all threatened to resign en masse. Had they done that, had they sent that letter, the country would have been thrown into chaos. And that's what people are concerned about could happen this time. There's nobody left inside that Justice Department that's going to say no to Donald Trump on an issue like that when he says, we want you to say there was fraud, we want you to investigate fraud. That's the concern here, is that there's nobody left to say no, Katie.